Morning, everybody. Great to be with everyone. Wonderful to be able to learn with colleagues. A lot of what I'm going to be doing is it's going to be more discussion. It's going to be more give and take. I look into this as an opportunity to be able to share some of the sources that I've been playing with and looking at, and to be able to share them with colleagues and to dialogue and discuss them. But having said that, it is with a purpose in mind. We do stand here a little over a month away from the high holidays. I know, I'm sorry if I'm breaking the news to you. And one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves, one of the questions that Dr. Erica Brown brought up is, when I come to the high holidays and I'm starting to get ready and I write down the things that I want to work on, why is it that I'm often writing down the same things? What is it that holds me back from actually taking the steps that I require in order to change, in order to become a better person? What are some of the things, what are some of the techniques, what are some of the approaches, what is some of the thinking that I need to get into in order to make sure that I actually move the ball a little bit and move forward and not always come back to the same place each year? So I want to put it out to you for just a quick moment. What are some of the things that you think either hold you back or you're pretty certain holds back your congregants from becoming better people? Yeah.
It's a combination of procrastination and things that divert your attention.
Okay, so right, our attention gets diverted very easily. Again, Dr. Erica Brown noted in one of the readings that we live in a country that is just awash with so many things that can divert us. By the way, I would point out that the single most greatest diverting factor is the phone, the smartphone, right? Because why is that so diverting? First, screens, we're addicted to them. Right? Are you one of those people who, like me, when you go to the gas station has a screen, you watch that little screen in the gas? Right? I do that all the time, and I keep asking myself, there is nothing but idiocy here. Wow, that's fascinating. Right? But it's not just screens in general, but a screen that you can carry in your pocket that actually connects you to the world, positively addicting. Right, so that is one among many kinds of diversions that we carry with us. And in those diversions, it presents an obstacle to our being able to go forward. What are some of the other things that people would say?
Not all congregants want to be challenged, so they say it point blank. We just want to come to your services so that we can leave feeling good.
Right, not all of our congregants want to be challenged. They want to come out with a certain feeling. That is really what they're looking for more than anything else. And they don't really want to change. And by the way, I think everything that we say about congregants, we should also be willing to just keep it in mind. Yes?
I think that for all of us, we run into the problem that whatever change we might need to make is usually going to force us to give something up that we're not, and we're not even sure what the thing is sometimes. So either A, we don't know what we're giving up, and it scares us to not know, or B, sometimes even worse, we know exactly what we'll have to give up in order to make a change, and we're not so happy about having to give that thing up to do it.
Okay, so what Adam was just talking about is when you know you have to change, you're going to be giving something up, and we might not want to be giving that thing up, and we might not even be aware of what we're going to give up when we go through it. The one thing I want to pick up on, Adam, is what you said was the really big word there for me: change. Right? We don't like change. Right? Our congregations don't like change. Have you ever noticed that, at least when it comes to holidays, Shabbat, right, you have more of those than Rosh Hashanah per year. Right? So Shabbat, you have a little more flexibility perhaps in your congregations, but one of the things that I've noticed is I can do a lot of different things on a Shabbat. I change something on the high holidays. I change one small thing. And they notice. I'm like, you notice nothing. You notice nothing about this service. You told me what I said, and I thought to myself, God, I didn't say any of that. And yet I changed this one melody, right? Or we drop this one prayer, and people come up to us, and what is oftentimes the reaction with that change? How could you? It's outrage almost. It's remarkable. You get outrage over a liturgical change, whereas honestly, you're like, do you have that outrage when you're reading the newspaper? Or you're watching the news? Right? But this changed. So, but why? I mean, these people are not bad people. They're not immoral. They're not insensitive. So why, though, does that little change trigger them?
Fear.
Huh? Why? What? In terms of fear, what do you mean?
We don't know what that reality feels like or looks like or who we are in that reality or what our relationships are. It's completely unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything that threatens the status quo, even if it's moving us towards something that we on some level want, can be terrifying.
Right, can be terrifying. And if we, sorry.
I was going to also say that for some people it's the familiarity, and to lose what they keep expecting brings them, anchors them in something very deep within themselves that they're looking for, that they don't have the rest of the year that comes at this time.
Right, we love familiarity. We love routine, right? And once we hit a routine, the best thing about it is it becomes so comfortable, right? It's like that great pair of jeans that you have or that sweatshirt. You just put it on, it feels good, and the second you put it on, the best thing about it is you no longer have to think about it. You're done, right? You're in a groove, you're in a zone, and it is so reassuring. And in our day and age when things move so fast, it is tremendously reassuring for many of our congregants to come to a place where no matter what our customs are and how they may vary from shul to shul, just that the shul within itself has this custom, people will groove to it. People will groove to it. Yes?
Well, back to the original question, what stops us? It takes really hard work to change.
Right.
And who's got the time, who's got the patience, and if I do that outward, how's it going to ripple through everything else that I'm doing?
Right.
Then to do.
Because if we want to change, right, the dirty little secret is the only way to do it is to do it on a daily basis. If we're not going to commit ourselves to some way of changing, some quality we want to develop, some practice we want to bring into our lives, if we're not willing to make that commitment on a daily basis, our ability to succeed, it's not impossible, it's not that it doesn't exist, but our ability to succeed becomes greatly diminished. The odds are simply, pardon the pun, not in our favor at this point. So it requires a lot of work. I want to throw out one thing that I think goes into what some of these comments have brought out, and that is also because we don't really know what we need to change. Because we lie. We lie a lot, and we lie to everyone. We lie to ourselves. We lie to our significant others. We lie to our children. We lie to our congregants. We lie to our boards. We lie. And we lie all the time. Now, a number of you are sitting there thinking to yourselves, not me. Which, of course, is the first lie. Right? Right? That's the first defense that we put up. Now, by the way, why do we say that? Why is it when I'm sitting and look, it would almost be impossible for anyone hearing someone say, people lie, you lie all the time. It's impossible for us to not have at least some small trigger rising up in our gut going, not me. Can't be talking about me. I don't lie. I think of myself as an honest person. In fact, if you go around and you ask anyone, right? Almost anyone in your life, are you an honest person? What are they going to say? Yes, right? Very few of us go around saying, no, actually, I'm pretty dishonest. I'm really actually a lying SOB when it comes right down to it. Right? That's just not going to be what people say. So what I want to be able to do is to be able to share some texts, some more modern ones, some more ancient ones, some rabbinic ones, to begin talking about and getting us comfortable with our lying selves, to understand and acknowledge that we all do it, that it is in fact very much part of being human, that it has been a challenge for us from the very beginning of our lives as people, and that the rabbis understood this. Not only did the rabbis understand this element of human nature, but they also gave ways of being able to address it. Yes?
Maybe getting ahead, but we too often say, right? So where is the truth in our day-to-day lives now? I mean, we're always in delusion. Are we always being untrue to ourselves? I mean, are there not glimpses of truth at least?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
There are glimpses. There are glimpses. And there's, in fact, a lot of times when we are telling the truth. It's just there's a lot of times when we're not. And being aware of the times that we don't gives us the insight into how we do this to ourselves.
Therefore, we know the difference anyway.
Right. Yes. And in fact, one of the problems that we have is when we don't, a Harvard scholar, and you'll forgive me for both the language I'm about to use, but it was his language in a small book that he wrote, and you'll forgive me the fact that I'm blanking on his name right now. A Harvard scholar wrote a book called On Bullshit. Okay? It was a small little book like this, and it was actually a scholarly work. He went through and did a history of the etymology of the word bullshit. Right? And he developed a theory about bullshit. And he came up with a great distinction between a person who bullshits and a person who lies. Right? And the distinction is this. A person who is lying knows the truth. A person who's bullshitting no longer can tell the difference. Which is to say, they've so accepted what it is that they're saying, what they're hearing, and what they are therefore taking in and sharing, that they no longer can really tell the difference between the truth and the lie. Right? Whereas a liar, in order by definition to be a liar, somewhere has to know the truth. Because if they don't know the truth, they can't actually be lying. And it'll be an interesting distinction as we play out. So, as I said, I gave a number of sources here. Before you all start reading and looking through the sources, let's just do the following thing. How many people know Brian Williams? Okay, so none of you raise your hand. So what is and who is and what happened to Brian Williams? Yeah.
Longtime NBC News anchor and managing editor who exaggerated his presence at various stories in dangerous situations over the years until it was exposed that he had not actually been in such danger in each of those reporting situations.
Right. So Brian Williams, people who may not be aware, was the NBC anchor for NBC News. He ran that for 10 years, I think at least. And during those 10 years, it was the top-rated news show. He was the top-rated and considered to be one of the most, if not most trusted people in news. Right? And he himself was perceived as being very successful, very articulate, just even outside of the news forum. This is a man who had real presence, knowledge, and accomplishment already, and it was acknowledged while in his lifetime. And so what does he do? He exaggerates certain stories, right? And it started with a story in 2003 where he was in a helicopter formation, right? And one of the helicopters in the formation got shot at and had to land. And as the story developed, he was in the helicopter. But he wasn't. He was in one of the other helicopters that was in the formation, not the one that actually got shot at, not the one that actually landed. Right? That's what he gets caught on. Because as he starts telling the story, he introduces himself more and more into the plot. Now, on the surface, can we just ask ourselves, how stupid is this? Like a little, galactic? Where would you rate this on the stupidity scale and why?
Well, I think it's pretty high because it's such an easy fact to figure out, right?
There were other people there.
Yeah.
Right, there were other people there. There were other people there. There were other reporters there. Right? And eventually the story gets out, and it is one of the guys who was flying the helicopter who basically said, yeah, that didn't happen. And it was reported in Stars and Stripes. What happened subsequently is NBC then did a review of a whole bunch of Brian Williams statements, and guess what? It was a pattern. It happened not just in this instance, but it happened in a number of instances, and it gets even stupider. Because one of those incidents occurred in 2011 during the Egyptian uprising in Tahrir Square, and he reports being in Tahrir Square, right, as one of the leaders of the pro-Egyptian forces at this time were coming through on their horses and camels and so forth, and firing and had whips and were trying to break up the demonstrations. And he talks about looking into the eyes of the leader as he rode through Tahrir Square. Well, in order to look through the eyes of the leader, there's one thing that's really important. You got to be in Tahrir Square, where they have NBC News cameras filming everything. And he wasn't. And they have him reporting from Egypt, and he's not in Tahrir Square. Right? So, on the one hand, in the helicopters, you had a pilot and a few other soldiers and so forth. Tahrir Square, you had thousands upon thousands, millions of people who saw the newscast. Right? So, it is so foolish. It is so easy to see how this one was going to get caught, and yet he did it anyway. Why?
Isn't that the nature of untruth? When you do it, then you, because of professional ego or some other reason, and you get away with it, it emboldens you and it desensitizes you, and therefore that untruth becomes, as you suggested, bullshit. It becomes an automatic response to truth, to bend it, to shape it, to nurture some need you have.
Okay, fair enough.
Rabbis say that one sin leads to another sin, leads to another sin.
Right. Avera goreret avera. Once you start down this path, it will keep going. It will keep going, which is why understanding how it is that we lie and that we lie is so important towards actually becoming better people. Yeah.
I think you go from being someone who does something to being someone who is something in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You shift, you become somebody who operates that way rather than somebody who transgressed, who lied. This becomes your new way of being.
Okay.
But look at this environment. The environment is kind of a lying environment too. And so, I mean, you kind of go, well, everybody's doing it, and what does it matter? And what's the fine line between the truth and the exaggeration?
Okay, by the way, I appreciate that comment, right? Once you say, right, it's in the environment,
right.
What have you just given yourself permission to do?
All of it.
Right. In other words, one of the ways in which we perpetuate this is we, as we often note in comments that we have made and shared with our congregants, we rationalize. What's one of the easiest ways to rationalize something like this? Everyone's doing it. Right? So once you begin the lie, once you start going down that path, it's very easy to find all sorts of reasons that will help justify and bolster what you're doing. So I just want to take a quick sec. I'm just going to read this through. This is Brian Williams' statement. He's being interviewed by Matt Lauer. This was a little over a month ago. He said, it had to have been ego that made me think I had to be sharper, funnier, and quicker than anybody else. Okay, note what he says here. This is already someone who is very sharp, very articulate, and very funny, and acknowledged as such. But guess what? It's not enough. Right? This man has achieved already on a professional external level. And he has been acknowledged. And yet even then, it's not enough. And he is driven, as he notes here, it had to be ego because he wanted even more. Right? I told the story correctly for years before I told it incorrectly. I was not trying to mislead people, and that to me is a huge difference. Okay, if he's not trying to mislead people, what is he trying to do? Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt here. What is it in his mind he is trying to do? If he as a newscaster says, I'm not trying to mislead people as I tell this story and it is not true.
I think he actually realized this. He was telling the story from a place of truth. He believed that the story he was telling was the truth.
Okay, either he convinced himself that it was the truth.
Or he was just entertaining people.
Yeah, he wanted to make a better story.
Entertaining people make a better story. By the way, when you entertain people and you make a better story and you tweak a story to make it look good, that you are telling, who are you really serving? Yourself. Right? So here's one of the things. You've all done this. We've all done this. I've done this. We've all told stories where we've lied. Right? Because what do? We embellish on it,
We're trying
right?
to make ourselves look better. It has nothing to do with misleading others. It's just I want to do better by myself.
Exactly. He may be, kind of in a sense, using the definition we played before, he may be bullshitting himself, right? Or he may really not be thinking of himself as misleading, but just
embellishing.
He wants to feel good about himself. The story is just better if he gets shot down.
Makes it sad.
Yeah, but in the
Randy.
process of it, of the telling the story, painting the picture, and really creating it for people, there's a great drama in creating a story and enacting it. And when you do that, imagination can place you anywhere.
Yeah. Right. And never underestimate your ability to imagine. Right? What science teaches us is that hindsight is not 20/20. That statement is simply wrong. Right? Hindsight is not 20/20 because when I recall something, let me put it to you as a form of a question. When I'm recalling something, I have an interaction with someone, it doesn't go well, there's some kind of tension, I go home and I start talking to Lori, my wife, about that interaction. What is the one thing you can almost always guarantee when I'm talking to my spouse about an interaction that didn't go well and I'm retelling my end of it? Right, somehow I look better in this. Right, in my retelling, right, very rarely in my retelling do I say, was I a schmuck today? Right? Occasionally it does because that makes the other stuff seem more true. Right? But oftentimes when we retell something, you've had that interaction with your congregant, with the synagogue president, with someone else on staff, and you're talking to someone else about it, very, very rarely do we not look good in that retelling. Yeah.
And the question that's surfacing for me is also what's the function of the storytelling in the context? And so he's a journalist, and so what we expect from him is truth, is facts. And I think about even in sermons, sharing stories but spinning them a little so that they fit the actual sermon,
Right.
as opposed to the real version might not fit as well. And so you add a sentence, you add a person, you add whatever it is. It's not, it is lying because you're recounting fake aspects of the story, but it's to serve the purpose in that context. So.
Right, so, I mean, this is being recorded, but we'll just put the cone of silence over this, right? We've all done that, right? I'm not the only one who's done that with certain... Okay, if it's just me, then I'm either the best or the worst person to be giving a talk on your lying self. We'll figure that out as we go along there.
It sounds to me a lot like a drug experience for a creative person. So the first time they do it, they write the greatest song of their lives and then say, I don't trust myself to be as creative and as brilliant without the high. So I don't trust that the sermon I give or the story I tell will be as good as what I get praised for if I don't embellish or enlarge.
Right.
I think we often operate on a sense of our own inadequacy. And so we do what we can to feed that sense of inadequacy by doing things like this. And this is just one example among many. You see lots of people in positions of power who do stupid, immoral things to feed that sense of inadequacy and make themselves feel more powerful.
Right, so one of the things that I do want to throw out there is, I don't want to take more time with the Brian Lewins quote, I want to get to some other stuff, though I encourage you to read his full thing, is what you're saying, which is we have this sense of inadequacy, right? Some of us cover it better than others, but all of us seem to carry it with us. And here, the lying might not be so bad, right? Because in certain situations, I need to lie to myself, perhaps, to pump myself up enough to give myself the confidence that I need in order to do the task that I'm faced with. And if I didn't go through the process of psyching myself up, right, by, lying to myself, by saying, no, I can do this, even if on all objective scales I cannot, right? But you never know. And sometimes that lying helps me overcome the inadequacies, that helps me actually succeed and do amazing things. And not just for myself, but amazing deeds that reach out and touch other people. So as I'm noting, right, the lying self, we do have to, as an aside, note that there is a positive to it. But we need to get into some of the negatives. Yeah, Ken?
And I hope this isn't a distraction for you when I take us to the vision, but I think it's worth pointing out that this is not a statement from Brian Williams' interview, and he's doing the very thing that's going on in this statement. He says, let me look at it. He says that it's from ego and it came from a bad place, and then he goes and says it came from a sloppy choice of words.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
And then he goes and says, I told stories that were not true, so he's gone back to being honest about what happened. And then he says, over the years, looking back, it's very clear I never intended to, which obviously he did. He says he got mixed up, which is clearly disavowing the active role in it. It got turned around in my mind. He's all over the joint.
Right, he's all over the joint because what's he in the process of doing? Right, he's all over
Justifying.
He's trying to make it okay for him.
Right, either we can say he's justifying the story to make himself look better in the story that he told that was a lie, which he lied about to make himself look better. Right? That's definitely one way to understand these comments, which, by the way, points out the problem here, that even the little lies that we tell ourselves and that we say, right, become a process unto themselves. That's why it is so important, if we're to become better people. This, I would argue, is if not ground zero for starting, it's got to be the second or third step along the way, because otherwise, how can you improve on what you're not even willing to see properly? A couple of other comments, then I just want to move on.
I just want to say that it seems like, I know for myself, if I'm dealing with something that bad that happened to me, I actually can see myself creating several different versions of that if I'm going to have to talk to somebody about it.
Okay,
he
so
just did it right out there in front of everybody.
Right, and that's the brilliance of Brian Williams here. It's not catching someone doing it. It's realizing we do it ourselves. I'll give you just a funny little scenario I was thinking of as I was preparing my remarks for this morning. I'm late for a funeral meeting with a family that I'm meeting with the day before the funeral actually takes place. I walk in, I'm 15 minutes late. And I say to them, I'm sorry, the World Cup final was on and I had to watch it. Right? Traffic was bad. My best friend just passed away. Which one are you going to choose? How many of us will go, let's Los Angeles, right? Traffic. Traffic is always bad. I live 5 minutes from the shul and I can complain about traffic. So I'll use that one. By the way, why, and this will come up a little bit later, why won't I say my best friend died? Huh? Well, it's not believable, but here's the thing. Here's the subtle thing that goes on with the lying, which is if you lie too much, what can't you do anymore? Huh? You can't catch it. If you lie too much, not only can you get caught, not only externally will it get caught because someone will say to someone I'm really sorry to hear about the rabbi's best friend, and the person goes, I didn't know I died. Yeah. Right? But the other thing is, not only will it get caught out there, but if you lie too much, it gets caught in here.
You can't remember what
no, it's not even that you can't remember. Look, that's always true with lies, but it's even more than that, which is I can lie to myself to a certain extent about how much I lie. Right? I can't rationalize a really big one, but a smaller one. This we're going to see is exactly what we can do. All right.
But it's in our name.
Huh?
It's in our name. We can't, it's so embedded. Our name is Ivri. We're going from one side to the other.
That's a cynical take on Ivri. All right, but let me just point out, the first thing is in noting with Brian Williams is that we're all Brian Williams. Right? The first thing to see is Brian Williams is a mirror that enables us to ask ourselves, wow, how do I do this in my own life? But what's fascinating is this retelling and the changes that come in retelling stories is as old as the Bible itself. We're all reading the book of Deuteronomy right now, right? Deuteronomy is one massive retelling from Moses' point of view of certain things. So I just pulled 3 of my favorites, right? Now here's the thing, folks. I know that we all know how to bring harmony to this, how to tay-roots these contradictions. Okay, I know we've all studied the different midrashim that say, oh yeah, when he said this, he meant this. Okay, don't share them. Not that I'm not interested in them, but all I'm sharing with you is just a very straightforward, shot kind of look at the text for what it is. For what it is. So I know there's lots of ways, as I said, of bringing these texts together in a different way. I'm just putting them out there on the table for us to just look at for what they are. So, Deuteronomy chapter 1. Then all of you came to me and said, let us send men ahead to reconnoiter the land for us, to bring back word on the route we shall follow and the cities we shall come to. What's the context? Spies. Okay, so what's Moses saying? You guys, y'all came to me. Right? right? And we're all laughing because we know,
says to him.
right? It's not. God says to him, let's send out. Okay, so just staying within this place of, we tend to manipulate the past in order to make ourselves look better here. What's Moses' concern? What's he doing? But what he's covering for? He's covering for God, potentially. In other words, he wants to distance himself and God from the events that happened. Right? And how does he do so? Hey, it wasn't even our idea to send out spies. Me and God, we didn't need it. That was what you asked for. And since you asked for it, everything that follows from your request is ultimately your fault.
But he's saying this to 40 years.
Right, it's not even there.
Right, well, he's saying, no, but that's the best part. He's saying it to people who weren't there. Well, but A, they may have heard, it may have been told, and B, perfect. Get to lay the groundwork anew. Right? What's the best way of rewriting history? When no one who was involved was around. Right? That makes it really easy. So here you see Moses distancing himself and distancing from God and indicating that everything that happened, your fault. Another one. Also in the first chapter. Oh, I love this one. Because of you, the Lord was incensed with me too. And he said, you shall not enter the land either. Okay, where are we going?
Complete shift.
Huh?
Complete shift.
Right, complete shift. But what's the story? Hitting the rock. Right now, again, many of us, I'm sure we've studied, there are, is it a dozen, 2 dozen different explanations of exactly what Moses' sin was. Right? But here's the thing. In context, everyone understands, while we might debate over the exact nature of the sin, what we don't debate over is who the sinner was. It was Moses. But no, in his retelling, he says, because of you, the Lord was incensed with me too. Now, given, and I set the quote down from Numbers chapter 20, given that God explicitly says to Moses, in almost the same language, because of you and your lack of faithfulness, right? You are not going to enter the land. So God says it directly to Moses. Moses changes it as he's retelling to the Israelites. What does he get out of this? Right? What's Moses seeking to do? I mean, it's a pretty big rewrite here. Yeah.
You'd say in our terms today, he's rewriting his legacy.
Okay. He's rewriting his legacy. He's saying it wasn't my fault that I wasn't able to go. It was actually your fault. Other thoughts? Yeah.
It's a classic projection.
Okay, he's projecting it onto them.
Projecting it onto
them. Right, but how is he able to do so given the fact that it was God who actually said to Moses, because of you? What's the mindset that allows him to pull this one off?
I reacted that way because the people behaved a particular way.
Okay.
And so therefore it was that.
Right. So one way is,
You made me do it.
Right here. It looks on the surface like it's an absolutely ridiculous claim on Moses' part.
It's revisionist.
Huh? Right. But look, we can all note it's revisionist. It's absolutely true. And it's hard to not see it that way. The question that we have to ask ourselves, or that I suggest we ask, is not why he's doing it. We understand why people revise history. It's how he does it. How he can do this in his own mind and actually look at himself in the mirror as being one who was the sharer of the Torah of truth.
In his own mind, the people were rebelling. He was calling them rebels. Right. So in his own mind, it was they who got him so angry that they God got angry at them.
Fair, exactly. Is that not conceivable? Yeah. By the way, again, always let's ask ourselves, that's great that Moses does that. Do I do that? Right? In my mind, am I triggered by other people, then act in a manner, right, that is less befitting of who I am as a rabbi, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as whatever, right? I'm triggered by them. I then act in a manner that's not appropriate. And then when I look back on it, I say, yeah, well, if they hadn't done that, right? Great way of not only just shifting the blame, but at least creating a little distance. In the first one, he just totally blames them. Right? In this one, at least, he acknowledges he was the sinner, but ultimately there were other factors factors that were involved.
It's the lie we all tell as parents, or as anyone else. You make me so angry. You don't make me anything.
Right.
I get angry because of what you did, but you didn't make me do it.
Right, absolutely. Look, it's the lie I tell my children all the time as to my hairline. You guys, I had a full head of hair before any of you. Of course, they've seen my father. It doesn't work so well.
Look what you did to your father.
Exactly where I learned that lie from.
The question I have then is it a lie, right? If Moshe is framing his experience in a particular way in his reflection back, which is, I behaved this way because you behaved this way, so therefore, by whatever property you have, right, it's your fault. So then is he lying at this point?
If he truly believes it, then he's not lying so much as bullshitting. But it is for us who have been given two texts. It's hard for us not to see the lie. And just because someone doesn't believe it's a lie doesn't mean that they're not actually lying. Yeah.
I just feel there's a tragedy here. Moses is not self-actualized, and at the end, with this lie, he just can't accept his reality. He has so much unfinished business. He was unable to accept that he's not the leader anymore, unable to accept the loss, unable to grieve for getting older and ready to die. They even say at the end, he's still vital and vigorous. So I think that lie is just part of this whole big picture of a man who is just unfinished and has not worked out his life.
Right, and part of what we can say is unfinished about him is the fact that he's not able to be honest. All right, I have to do a few more texts because we're out of limited time. I'm glad to chat with anyone afterwards if we haven't explained things thoroughly enough. The last one is from this week's Torah portion, right? Surrounding the Ten Commandments and the golden calf. God sees what's happening with the Israelites worshiping golden calf. God says to Moses, look what they're doing, go down there. So when he tells the story in this past week's Torah portion, I started down the mountain, a mountain ablaze with fire, the two tablets of the covenant in my two hands. I saw how you had sinned against the Lord your God. Okay, well there he's right. You had made yourselves a molten calf. You had been quick to stray from the path that the Lord had enjoined upon you. Therefore, I gripped the two tablets, smashing them before your eyes. When Moses describes this, right, what is his emotional or mental state? He comes down the mountain, he sees the Israelites, and what does he see? He sees that they are, right, they're being unfaithful, and therefore he grips the tablets and throws them. What is completely missing from this story that was explicit in the first retelling in Exodus? The rage. Right? If you look at the text from Exodus, as soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he became enraged. And he hurled the tablets with his hands. Right? The first one, he's furious. He destroys the handiwork of God. The only thing in the Torah that's ever described as being Etzba Elohim, the work of God. Right? Human beings are described as being created with Tselem Elohim, but nothing, not even creation itself, even though it could have been given this designation, is given this designation. And Moses broke it because he was ticked off, is the first explanation. And the second explanation, what does Moses allow? He doesn't say it explicitly, but what does he allow us to speculate about his mindset? Did he do it out of anger?
It was calm, cool, collected. I needed to make a point. You guys weren't keeping up.
Right. Huh? Well, there's disappointment. You guys were bad, but Moses is like, okay, right? They're not ready for this. Kaboom. They're going to worship this the way they worship the calf. Kaboom. Right? They're already violating these commandments. If I bring these down and seal this covenant, they're going to start off immediately by being in a place of sin and a place of unfaithfulness. I'm going to break them so they don't do that. However you fill it in, Moses opens up the possibility in his retelling that he did this deliberately, not out of anger. And why would he want to say that he did this one deliberately and not just because he was really, really enraged? Huh? Because of the one right before. There is an element, you begin getting a sense sometimes of, you look at these comparison of, the man's totally rewriting things, right? I think in part here, again, this is more, he is justifying his actions, right? Because one thing that you can't say is that there's absolutely no doubt that Moses broke the tablets. Okay, the external action is without doubt. So what he is doing is he is justifying it, right? And saying, no, this wasn't out of anger. This was deliberate, right? Again, Moses is an amazing mirror. When we retell stories, right, where we are in the course of retelling it, sharing a point in time when we lost it emotionally, very rarely do we actually say or give insight to the emotion, saying, I was guided by my anger and I just went ahead. On the contrary, oftentimes we'll try to scale that back, right? Because in the course of doing this, we want to make it seem like, well, no, we were acting rationally and these things that we did were deliberate and there was thought behind them. Might not have been the smartest thing, but I was at least thinking. Yeah, Josh.
So one thing that I'm asking is, what were the conditions that enabled him to say this and have it be heard? And part of it, at least as I'm reading it, is that they're kind of succeeding. He's been a successful leader. He's brought him to the end. And so in his attempt to retell the story, there's kind of like a justification for his response. Whether it's right or wrong, that's something that we can debate. But on one hand, you have him saying, look, we made it, so I can tell the story as, I see it because it works. And then the other side of it is the people accept it. They're not calling bullshit on him.
No.
Well, he had the same credibility that Brian Williams had, therefore he could use that as his ability to convey that, and who knows, maybe the people did go for it.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we're going to skip one source that I'll try to come back to, and it's a source from Dan Ariely. Wrote this wonderful book called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. If you ever want to be really depressed about yourself, and the human condition, this is the book to read. But I want to get to what it is, what the two of you were just talking about, which is how can he get away with this, right? So on the one hand, the easy answer is, as we noted before, he can get away with it because, the whole generation's died out. He's dealing with a blank slate in a sense, and he has leeway. Not enough people know.
I just think it's ironic because of his relationship with God. I mean, he can't possibly believe he can fool God, and
Okay.
that's the piece that's missing.
Yes, I think that is the piece, and I think that is the rabbinic piece. And what I'd like to suggest is the rabbis understand this problem. They understand this very well. They understand exactly how we act, and they have, through the high holidays, shown us at least one way to begin addressing it. So I'm just going to skip the Dan Ariely source just because I want to be able to get to these because I want to give some explicit Homer Ladrush for the high holidays, but we will come back to it, I hope. So the first one is from the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. It says the following. I toyed with the translation a little, and I was having a heck of a time getting Hebrew on this, so excuse the fact I just used English for this. The world is judged at 4 periods in the year. On Passover for grain, on Shavuot for the fruits of trees, on Rosh Hashanah, all the inhabitants of the world pass before him like flock of sheep. As it is said, he who fashions the hearts of them all, who understands all their doings. And on Sukkot, they're judged for water. Okay, I love this. This cracks me up. Right? Which one of these is not like the others? Right? right. Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, very easy and straightforward. What joins them together?
Nature.
Right. It's all nature stuff. Right? And then what gets thrown in there? Rosh Hashanah. Right? Rosh Hashanah gets thrown in there. Chancellor Ismar Shorsh once gave a brilliant drasha on this at the seminary. And he noted the following. He said, when you see this kind of text, and you realize and remember what Rosh Hashanah was and how it was observed the way the Torah describes it, right? What one comes to the realization is that the rabbis understood that human beings needed this period of time. That the rabbis themselves, he notes, create the Rosh Hashanah as we observe it. And when they create it, they first create it with a very specific focus. And the specific focus is contained within the Mishnah. Right? And what does that Mishnah say? What is it that unfolds on Rosh Hashanah? What's the image that the rabbis are trying to conjure up here? Okay, we're a flock of sheep, but a flock of sheep that are doing what?
Being judged.
That are being judged. Right? That are being judged. Now, the rabbis will then take that, and later generations are going to take that notion of being judged. And by the way, they're being judged because what can God do that human beings cannot do? According to this text. It's just a quote from Psalm. God knows. God knows. So here's the thing. You can fool yourselves. You can fool everyone around you. But according to the rabbis, you cannot fool God. And on Rosh Hashanah, at least as they're first articulating it 2,000 years ago, as they're creating this holiday to address what they see is a need on the part of the people, they see people need a time for the most profound, most clear-sighted, unblemished, unbiased honesty. And the way they help the people do this is they emphasize this element of God as judge and as one who sees absolutely everything. And then that idea that is in the Mishnah is taken by Unatana Tokef, and they go to town. So I use, this is the translation, by the way, from the new JPS Mahzor. Let us speak of the sacred power of this day, profound and awe-inspiring. On it, your sovereignty is celebrated, and your throne from which you rule in truth is established with love. Truly, you are the judge and prosecutor, expert and witness, completing the indictment, bringing the case, and enumerating the counts. You recall all that is forgotten. In other words, I may be thinking no one sees. I'm wrong. And will open the book of remembrance, which speaks for itself, for our hands have signed the page. Right? With this opening paragraph, irrespective of the theology. And I would totally ignore the theology. And this is a comment that I've made in the past and that I'll be making this year. When it comes to Natana Tokef, ignore the theology, experience the drama. Right? And what's the drama here trying to convey? Who's responsible for this life that I'm leading? I am. My actions have written it. So it then goes on. The great shofar will be sounded, the still small voice will be heard, angels will be alarmed, seized with fear and trembling, declaring, this very day is the day of judgment. For even the hosts of heaven are judged. No one is innocent in your sight. Now we may say, well, that's not a really nice God. I thought this God is meant to, be my pal. And yet this God says no one's innocent in this God's sight? To which the answer is, absolutely. Absolutely. No one can be innocent. No one is perfect. Rather than seeing this as something that is a dismissive of human nature, I happen to love this line because it's honest about it. And just says who we are. We are people who are going to screw up. Right? The only question in my mind is not if I'm going to screw up. Every morning, it's how soon. Right? Will it be within the first half hour? Right? Or 3 hours of my day? The text then goes on. All lives on earth will pass before you like a flock of sheep. As a shepherd examines the flock, making each sheep pass under the staff, so you review, number, count, judging each living human being, determining the fate of everything in creation and ascribing their destiny. Again, putting any issues we have with the theology aside, what are the rabbis doing, and what are the author of this trying to evoke within us? And how are they going about it?
Strip yourself down because you'll be stripped down. Come to know yourself fully because God knows what you forget.
Okay, so great. Either come know yourself fully because God knows you forget, right? And I love the image. The rabbis just talk about a flock of sheep, right? Unatan Tokef takes it and goes one step further. What is this flock of sheep doing? One by one by one. You think I'm not going to see, right? To which the answer is, one by one by one. They take the same image. They understand the text. They understand its intention. And they simply drive it home all the more with this vision that we're meant to have. Right? And if you get yourself into that mindset, if you get yourself into the mindset that one truly believes that you are standing before the King of Kings, the Holy One, the ultimate judge, the one who can see absolutely everything, it's not only just what do I see, it's what does God see? Because it's too hard for me to ask what I see. Because I lie to myself. And I can rationalize it. Right? What this prayer invites is for us to ask ourselves, what is that book of life really look like? What are the deeds that are there, that are written down for me to look at, for me to examine, and for me to truly see who I am? Right? That is what I'd suggest this prayer is trying to evoke. And that is true, very true, the core idea that the rabbis had about Rosh Hashanah. And they had that idea because they understand how well it is we lie. We lie about things that are little, and we lie about things that are big. And we are superb at it. Yes, I'm sorry.
I was just thinking, every life is under scrutiny, is what this is teaching us by the higher authority, the Dayan. But it occurs to me that with the technological expertise today, this is true. Every life is under scrutiny. Every detail is recorded and can be assessed. And if our technological prowess that we humans have managed to learn, who is to say that perhaps on another level, every life is under scrutiny?
Yeah, and right, and depending on the congregation and your relationship with the congregation and your own theology, how you choose to present this text, and what it is that what you want to wrestle with in terms of presenting it, each one of us will play it to our own congregations. To my mind, I always start this by saying to my congregation, it doesn't matter what you think about God. This is a matter of what the Siddur wants you to feel at this moment. And at this moment, it's to have that sense that I am not able to hide anything. And the unbelievable thing is that when people realize, or there is some sense of being watched, people change. Now, I'm not talking about just God here, right? Experiments that were done. Dan Ariely talks about it. Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Happiness Hypothesis, talks about it. These are well-established experiments where they've had people take tests in a room, right? And they've had people take tests in a room, some of them, just in a room like this, some of them with a mirror, right? And they didn't know if there was someone on the other side of the mirror or not. But there was a mirror, which meant that while they're taking the test, they look up and what do they see? They see themselves, which is to say they see someone outside of themselves looking at themselves. They've even done this experiment where they've had a room like this, and then they've taken a room and they put pictures of eyes in it. Right? Pictures, an eye, just a picture of an eye. And they noted the change in people's behavior. Right? I went to a school, a small liberal arts college just outside of Philadelphia. It had an honor code. For 4 years, I never took a proctored exam. All our exams, all our finals were unproctored and done on the honor code system. You could come at 9, at 2, and at 7 to the main hall, right? You'd pick up your book, you'd find a room within the building, you'd sit down, time would start, you take the exam, time is finished, you close the exam, you brought back the book. Now, there's 2 elements to this honor code. One is there was a lot of training about it at the beginning of the year. We went over it with the students again and again, and it was really emphasized, right? And we remind students when we get to the finals, reminders would go out about everyone's on their honor. The other thing is, after you finish the exam, you had to write down on the pledge, I have observed the honor code. Of the things that were effective, what do you think worked most? All the lovely flowery words about how we had to observe this, or the signing of the pledge? Signing of the pledge, right? And here again, Dan Ariely did an experiment with Princeton, which has an honor code, and 2 other East Coast universities where they don't, right? And he ran an experiment, and what he found is, if you just talk about it, the Princeton students would cheat just as much as the other students. Right? But when you introduce the signing of the pledge after they've taken the exam, right, the Princeton students cheated less. Why? What was it? What do you think it is about the signing as opposed to all the talking?
It's a pledge. It's something in black and white. It's something you've done. It's an action.
Okay, it's black and white, something you've done?
It's forcing you to lie and you can see the lie.
Right, it's forcing you to lie, see lie. You sign it, it becomes all of a sudden concrete.
Very real.
Right? And I think the rabbis understood the need for that as well. I think that's why this image, I think that's why Unatana Tokef is such a disturbing prayer. It's meant to be disturbing, right? This prayer, more directly than anything else, calls us out and demands of us a level of self-reflection that we tend to hide from throughout the year. And so the rabbis are providing this very, very powerful vision or image to carry us through. Yes?
So I think it's really interesting to say that if the eyes are on you, you're going to not lie as much. All the more so when people do lie in the public eye, a la Brian Williams or Lance Armstrong, how completely atrocious. All eyes are upon these people, and they went and lied anyway.
Right, which tells us what about our ability to lie?
We're really good at it. We're really good at it.
Right. We will go, in order to protect ourselves, in order to paint ourselves in as positive a light as possible, we will all go to great lengths, right? And we will do it, as I said, on small things and on big things. Sometimes, it occasionally happens, not often, when I ask my children to do a chore. Occasionally, I mean, they're Rabbi's kids, so you know they're perfect, right? But occasionally I ask them to do something and it doesn't get done, right? The garbage being one of those things that doesn't get done. So when I come into the den and I say, hey, how come the garbage isn't taken out? What do you think my children say? Right? They'll either say, well, no, what they don't say is, I forgot. What they often will say is, I was too busy, I was doing homework. Now here's the thing, I've caught them before when they've given me the doing homework answer, and I'll be like, yeah, you did your homework for that class yesterday. You told me. Right? But my son thought, yeah, but I'm doing my homework, which is what he simply did was take one reason from here and apply it to the situation here in order to make sure that he didn't look like he was just forgetful. Right? And I love that because I realize I do that all the time. Right? Like Brian Williams, like Moses, we take the different factors that are out there, and because we're such good storytellers, we weave together the narrative using the elements that are there in order to justify how we look. As I said, these sources point to the challenge that we have in telling the truth, the acknowledgement of the rabbis that they get that challenge, and also within the liturgy, one of the ways in which they seek to help us address it. I hope it has been disturbing, but helpful to be able to look at these texts, and I appreciate the time being able to share with you.